Hello, my name is Andrea Interguglielmi, and today I will be talking about my game Nauticrawl, published by Armor Game Studios, and the many headaches that went into designing this experience, which blends a real-time machine simulation with turn-based roguelike elements. So you might notice during the slides that this game doesn't quite look like a standard roguelike. And in fact, at some point, we decided to drop completely the roguelike tag. We didn't want to go for roguelite either, not even roguelike-like or none of that craziness. I had to accept that this game is just unique on its own and it blends games that I love. And of course, I do happen to love roguelikes a lot, and that really shows. You will see during the slides. But definitely one of the major influences is the one that you can see here, the usual suspect, Rogue, which is a brilliant roguelike that really influenced me growing up as a game designer. Some of the other elements that I borrowed from other games are sort of space cockpit simulation with X-Wing, which is a game that I loved growing up with. A dark room also showed me how narrative can be seamlessly blended with a roguelike experience. And The Room, I love this game because it has all these gizmos that you can fiddle with, but there's no tutorial, no hand holding. So all of these influences sort of went into crafting my own vision. And that's what you're presented with when the game starts. You have no idea of how this thing works. Nothing is going to be told you if not a simple premise. And that premise is that you are stealing this machine to try and get away from a horrible situation, but your kind is never allowed to ever touch this machine. So you have no idea of how it works. You stole it, and now you're going to have to put up with this situation. You're going to have to push every button, pull every lever, and eventually the game, as you become familiar with the machine, will sort of fade into a dungeon crawl exploration experience, and you will dungeon crawl your way to salvation. The game is set in a procedural world. It's not grid-based, but it does have fog of war. It's presented from the top inside a radar, and it's all generated using Voronoi cells. And I make these procedural islands that I can scale up and down depending on the need during the game. It's displayed inside the radar, and you cannot really see anything else outside. And even the description of the places you will discover are all handled through monitor interface. And that's because the story goes that the pressure on this planet is so massive that the only thing that can roam around the surface of this planet is this machine called the Nauticrawl. So there's not going to be big portholes showing outside. There's only monitors. And that's really what I like to sort of talk about this game as a roguelike that has been scattered around a machine simulation, because many elements of roguelikes are actually in these interfaces. There is a log of every action happening both inside the machine and the world outside, and there is a monitor just for that. There is a monitor just for the inventory. There is a monitor just for the stats, and the stats actually map almost one-to-one to a traditional dungeon crawler. There is hull integrity, which is the HP of the player. There is fuel, which is hunger, battery, stamina, and components are parts that you equip on the machine to actually augment what it does, weapons and improvements as such. So all of that is presented through some sort of old terminal simulation, and it really do work like a terminal in that it displays tile-based two colors graphics. So at some point I figured, well, we have these old terminal interfaces. Why don't we also display some old school text mode art with that. And so I got in touch with this amazing Textmode artist. His name is Ben Jones. You can find him on Twitter by the name of Polydux. And he loves to use Rex Paint. I personally a big fan of Playsky, so we used to pipe all the data through Playsky for the final JSON output format. So I mentioned that all of that is a big puzzle to solve. But I also mentioned that all of these controls are also the user interface to a dungeon crawling sort of gameplay. So really, which one is it? It's actually both. These panels are both they sort of blend together escape room puzzle elements with being a user experience to pilot this big house-sized crawling machine. And the core gameplay loop is all about experimenting and eventually dying. It's part of the experience, but hopefully you will learn and carry forward your meta experience onto the next run. There are rewards that try and sort of hook you with curiosity so that you don't give up, and that's scraps of lore that will be revealed to you eventually and more controls to fiddle with. So you will be presented with even more buttons, even more levers to press, and that will start the whole process again, revealing new scraps of lore, die, repeat. Now, it is quite a mix. And of course, some of these elements at some point, it was only natural they would start clashing one with the other. And in fact, that happened. The real-time simulation part of this game at some point specifically got so big and predominant that sort of chewed the dungeon crawling experience. And what happened was that by the time you would start facing enemies, you had all these red blinking lights all over the place, asking for attention, asking for some actions to be performed to maintain the machine. But the enemy, meanwhile, was still kicking your ass in real time. And that really, it was a mess. It was really hard to play. By the time we entered the first early beta of the game, general consensus was that pressing all the buttons was fun, but players were dying without even understanding why. Very few testers managed to get to the end of the demo, I think like 3 or 4. And so it was really time to go back to the drawing board once again. And it was scary because, of course, we were at this point right in the middle of this project, approaching the final deadline. So clearly something went wrong along the way, because in my mind, the actual dungeon crawling part of this game was always meant to be turn-based. It was a slow experience about wonder and discovery. So what happened? Well, what happened, I guess, is that it became sort of a natural design process to also make the world around you real time, just like the rest of the machine, because I didn't want to take players out of the simulated and atmospheric experience. And if I was to at some point present the player with a big banner saying, it's your turn, or it's the enemy's turn, now you can do this, now you can do that, blocking the player during this experience would have taken him out of the immersion. And I didn't want that. So now the headache was really, how do I keep not blocking the player while still slowing down this experience in a way that simulates a turn-based dungeon crawling experience? And it turns out that the solution was all in the story setting. This game is all about a massive crashing atmosphere that forces you inside the only machine that can crawl around this planet. It's all about pressure. So what if I use pressure as part of the simulation? What if I let the user pipe in pressure into the engine, and I will make sure that it takes some time to actually build up the required pressure to move forward. And that will slow down the experience, but it will also create some interesting side effects, because the player with some levers will be able to also speed up the time that it takes to accumulate the pressure to move forward. And when the engine is put under stress, it will start giving up, releasing heat. Not only that, it will make more noise, and the noise and the heat will both impact on the stealth device, which will in turn require more power. So really, I not only I did slow down the experience in a way that was sort of unique, but I also made the turns part of the machine simulation, which was sort of cool side effect I didn't see coming. So what about the enemy's turn? The enemy's turn, the solution for that was also part of the story setting. We are talking about a place that the game refers to as the Forbidden Surface. So it's been abandoned for generations. And so I made it so that naturally both creatures and technology develop this way of not wasting energy when nothing moves, because it's a place that is mostly deserted. So I reprogrammed the AI so that it only reacts when something makes a noise and moves. So at this point, I have the player blocked and being able to experiment with all the different values of the machine, and nothing moves until you commit to moving forward. So the game is becoming very strategic, and the enemies are all there silently waiting for you, and the atmosphere is even creepier than before. So in my mind, it's all working and it's great. So what happens when we give it back to the players? They don't realize there are turns at all. They come back to us saying, I make a move, I'm still chased by the enemies, so I want to make the next move faster. And I go fast and there's heat coming out of the engine, but I'm just trying to be as fast as I can because the enemy is chasing me. It's still a big mess. Like this is not slow at all. And I'm like, damn it. I basically need to teach the player past the initial stage of pressing every button, which is fun if nobody tells you anything. Then there is the dungeon crawling part, which has now some rules. And how do I teach the player about rules if there's no tutorial? Yet another headache. And I'm about to wrap this talk now, because really this was what sort of unlocked us from this evil loop of obfuscation. We eventually came out with this idea of trying to understand when the player is dying repeatedly. And at that point, after you start a new run and you turn on the machine will enter some sort of safety lock, and it will present the player with a check to rebalance the machine. And in that check, you might be asked to check on the battery or the stealth device or how much hull integrity is left. And eventually, even the turns. The turns is a bit of a bastard move that the game does on the player, in that it will spawn a creature next to you when the game starts. So you will actually hear the thing roaming around you, and it's pretty creepy. And a radio message will tell you that you have to stay still. So the message is broadcasted to all the pilots in the area, and it's saying, stay still, remember that nothing moves until you make a move. So just move very quietly and the creature will not notice you, will take care of the creature, and you keep going. And if you die straight after that, it's fine, because the game will then restart and it will teach you yet one more game mechanic. So it does that one trick at the time. And that really worked. It is quite a unique experience. There were many headaches involved, and we of course we were scared to release this thing in the wild, and we couldn't have been happier about the reception. The game has scored a very positive rate on Steam, and so far we have like 60 plus reviews, positive reviews and counting. Some nice comments on each as well. Please don't kill me because somebody said that the game looks like NetHack. We just hope that the game is fun, regardless of whether it's a standard roguelike or not. We just hope that people are gonna enjoy the experience. So yeah, it was a fun ride. I hope it was fun to hear about all these gameplay and game design challenges. And if you want to hear more about me rambling about Nauticrawl, please get in touch on Twitter.